Majority Leader, any indication?
Mr. Speaker, we are ready to take the motion set out on the order paper addendum. That is the order paper addendum, the approval of the mid-year review of the budget statement and economic policy of government and supplementary estimates for 2019 financial year. Speaker, I believe that motion itself has a little bit of a problem, but I believe it will be appropriately addressed at the end of the day, because, Mr. Speaker, when a mid-year review of a budget statement is brought to this House, it is for the information of this House. It really does not require the approval of this House. But a supplementary estimate will require the approval of this House. Unfortunately, it's been conjoined. But I'm saying that when we get there, Mr. Speaker, after the motion is moved, we'll know what to do, what is appropriate.
Honorable Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Ghanaian people have been waiting. The private sector, businesses, ordinary Ghanaians. You are talking procedure. What did you advertise here? You quoted a figure of supplementary estimates. So, Mr. Speaker, it behoves the minister. If you are here for mid-year review, which will take the form of statements as you did in the past, we are ready. If you are asking for supplementary approval, access to do what is needful constitutionally. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we are ready for you.
Item addendum on the other paper. Minister for Finance. Honorable Minister for Finance, the floor is yours.
The Right Honourable Speaker, Honourable Members of Parliament, today the 29th of July 2019, on the authority of His Excellency President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, I beg to move that this Honourable House approves the mid-year review of the budget statement and economic policy of the Government of Ghana and supplementary estimates for the 2019 financial year. Mr. Speaker, on November 15, 2018, I presented to this House the budget statement and economic policy of the Government of Ghana for the 2019 financial year. I stand before you today to present the mid-year fiscal policy review of the 2019 budget statement and economic policy and a supplementary estimate of government for the 2019 financial year. Mr. Speaker, I'm performing this statutory function in accordance with Article 179, Clause 8 of the 1992 Constitution and Standing Order 143 of this august House, which set out the modalities for laying supplementary estimates before this House, and Section 28 of the Public Financial Management Act 2016, Act 921, which enjoins the Minister responsible for Finance to prepare and submit to Parliament a mid-year fiscal policy review. Mr. Speaker, this statement is an abridged version of the mid-year review of the 2019 budget statement. I would like to request the Hansa Department to capture the entire statement on the mid-year fiscal policy review and supplementary estimates. Mr. Speaker, I wish to update the House on key developments since the budget presentation last year, a few of which are challenging our collective efforts to improve and expand the economy. Some of these developments have imposed significant shocks and will require decisive actions to maintain economic policy. Mr. Speaker, as we cross the mid-year mark, let us thank God and bless His holy name for His love, which endures forever. I am confident that as in Isaiah 61:7-8, instead of shame and dishonor, Ghana will enjoy a double share of honor. We will possess a double portion of prosperity in our land, and everlasting joy will be ours. So all that this is of us that we have must be blessed. Mr. Speaker, let us be joyful for how far the Lord has brought us. Now, Mr. Speaker, in line with our objective of building a strong economy for jobs and prosperity, government outlined a number of priority projects for the 2019 budget. They include maintaining macroeconomic stability, modernizing agriculture, provision of efficient infrastructure, industrialization, private sector growth and entrepreneurship, social intervention policies, and financial sector cleanup. I'm happy to announce that these priority projects are on, and we are delivering on the real change that Ghanaians voted so massively for in December 2016. In the last 31 months, Mr. Speaker, year after year, budget after budget, together with the active support of the people and businesses, we are building a confident, stronger, and ambitious economy. The shared progress that we are making is real, and the credit for this success is, in fact, a shared one with the people we are elected to lead, serve, and obey. However, Mr. Speaker, it must be stressed that we continue to face serious risks and challenges which we must, with the support of the people, tackle head-on, because these risks and challenges combine to slow our efforts to improve with urgency, depth, and discipline the lives of our people, especially in the provision of public and social infrastructure such as roads, community housing, schools, clinics, water, and electricity. We believe that the accelerated progress which the people of Ghana desire and deserve will be better served if these risks and challenges are neutralized. Mr. Speaker, a 2019 report of the IMF using Ghana as a case study pretty much captures where our economy was and where we've taken it over the past 31 months, and the greater gains we are poised to make from the decisions we have taken as a result of the competence and discipline we have applied in implementing them. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I quote from the very beginning of the report: Ghana has been hailed as one of sub-Saharan Africa's success stories. It was the first to free itself from colonial rule in 1957. It built a stable democracy in the 1990s, overcoming decades of political upheaval, a thriving economy fueled by exports of cocoa, gold, and more recently oil, helped cut the poverty rate from 53% in 1991 to 21% in 2012. But by 2015, Ghana's economy was in trouble, hobbled by widening current account and budget deficits, rampant inflation, and a depreciating currency. Credit dried up as interest rates rose and banks' bad loans piled up. At the root of Ghana's woes was out-of-control government spending. In early 2015, Ghana turned to the IMF for a $918 million loan to help stabilize the economy. Unquote. The report goes on to highlight some of the achievements chalked in the past 31 months. Quote, Ghana's economy is on the mend. The trade and budget deficits are narrowing. The pace of economic growth is poised to rise to 8.8% in 2019 from 2.2% in 2015. The inflation rate is projected to fall to 8% from almost 19%. Cuts to wasteful spending made room for much-needed social service, such as a free secondary education. For Ghana's 28 million people, it all adds up to higher incomes, better job opportunities, and more purchasing power, unquote. Mr. Speaker, true to our word, we have successfully completed and exited the IMF ECF program with the final review completed last April. We have had to make some difficult but necessary choices to correct the mistakes that forced the previous government to seek an IMF bailout for oil-rich Ghana. We believe that the decisions we have taken so far will safeguard the long-term interests of the nation and our people, and the President thanks the people for bearing with us. Economic management, after all, is about making difficult choices. It is about putting the national interest above sometimes populist, self-serving, and short-term choices. The shared successes achieved so far attest to the difficult fact, like the good stewards mentioned in the parable of talents in the Bible, we have prudently utilized the very limited resources that we were entrusted with to achieve more. I stood here, Mr. Speaker, in March 2017 with our 2 fishes and 5 loaves, and the Lord has indeed blessed us. Mr. Speaker, we've been able to entrench fiscal discipline through the strategic allocation of resources, efficiency in the use of public funds, as well as enhancing transparency and accountability in our management of the public purse. Candidate Akufo-Addo promised to protect the public purse, and that's exactly what we've been doing at the Treasury. To highlight that point, Mr. Speaker, in a space of 31 months, by reviewing contracts that we either sole source or procured through restrictive tender, the Akufo-Addo administration has made savings of $2.75 billion, which breaks down to $800 million in 2017, $1.1 billion in 2018, and $1.085 billion in 2019. Mr. Speaker, permit me to compare these savings made by the Public Procurement Authority under this administration to what happened under the previous one, even though more contracts were awarded through sole sourcing and restrictive tender annually than any year under the government. In 2013, savings registered was 0 cedis. In 2014, again, savings made amounted to 0 cedis. In 2017, savings made total 0 cedis. In 2016, again, the PPA made 0 cedis in savings. When it comes to how taxpayers' money have been managed, the facts, Mr. Speaker, speak loudly. We believe it is very important on days like this that we show to the people of Ghana that this government, the Akufo-Addo government, the New Patriotic Party government, your government, spends the taxes you pay for your benefit and for the benefit of the collective. This is because we consider the social contract between government and the people as a sacred covenant. Mr. Speaker, in each of the 57 or so cabinet meetings we have attended in the last 31 months, the President is always quick to remind us, to stress to us as ministers, the urgency in meeting the needs and aspirations of the Ghanaian people. Just last week, as we discussed the details of this statement I'm reading now, the President reminded us that in spite of all that we have managed to achieve so far, too many Ghanaians must still be taken out of poverty. He reminded us that we are certainly not there yet, that our efforts to confront poverty, fix our roads, provide community housing, support our farmers, protect the vulnerable, offer better conditions of service to our nurses, teachers, security officers, get businesses operating optimally, we're being checked, and that we should be bolder in taking steps that will offer us this fiscal space to improve the lives of those we lead, serve, and obey. Today, I will announce the calculated and balanced measures that we intend to take with the support of this House, with essentially the aim of improving lives. Mr. Speaker, the Akufo-Addo government leads, serves, and obeys. The evidence is mightily clear that we offer better and assured leadership in managing the Ghanaian economy. All key indicators for building a stronger economy are being effectively and are stronger now than they were 30 months ago. Inflation has dropped to single digits and dropping. Interest rates continue to drop. External payment position has strengthened. Exchange rates have been more stable. The fiscal deficit has reduced to below 5%. Real GDP growth has rebounded and remains robust. Debt to GDP ratio is below 60%. The banking sector has been rescued and recapitalized. Mr. Speaker, as a result of bold and decisive measures we took to fix the banking crisis, our banks are stronger and richer, and with the cost of borrowing dropping, banks can and should therefore do a lot more to support the growth and expansion of business, which will create more jobs under the stable environment that has been provided by government for that exercise. Mr. Speaker, we recall the last time the MPP was in government, a government in which you, Mr. Speaker, served with pride and distinction. Our financial sector expanded considerably. It was under President J. Akufo that we saw increases in the number of banks. The sector became competitive, with banks chasing ordinary workers with loan offers. This resulted in one of the highest average GDP growth rates in our country's history. We know that the foundation for growing businesses and creating jobs everywhere is a vibrant, well-governed, well-resourced, competitive financial services sector operating under a stable economic regime. That is why we could not watch the sector collapsing, even if it meant slowing down for a year or so on some of our own scheduled programs. In the recovery process, we managed to set up the Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited and capitalize it with 450 million Ghana cedis. Just this month, CBG has released funds totaling 430 million to Cocoa Board for Cocoa Roads. We provided funding of 11.2 billion, Mr. Speaker, to secure depositors' fund in the failed banks. The bank, the Ghana Amalgamated Trust, has provided funds to capitalize solvent indigenous banks that were struggling to meet the enhanced minimum paid-up capital of 400 million cedis. We have recently provided an additional 925 million for payouts to small depositors of the 386 microfinance institutions. Mr. Speaker, we have restored confidence in the banking system, securing the otherwise distressed deposits of some 2,655,100 customers, as well as saving over 3,000 jobs. Today, total bank assets have shot up to 112.8 billion. Growth of credit to the private sector is rebounding assuredly by 16.8% in June 2019. I'm therefore happy to announce confidently that Ghana is seeing the revival of that zealous, responsive, and at the same time, responsible banking environment we had been reduced to reminiscing. Mr. Speaker, the Akufo-Addo government is here to lead and also to serve. We are serving the people better in keeping their lights on, in getting our children into the classrooms and feeding them there, in getting our NHIS cards to work, in reducing the cost and hassle of clearing goods at our ports, in keeping our police on our streets, in helping farmers to produce more and to earn more. Mr. Speaker, again, the Akufo-Addo government is an obeying government. We trust and obey for the people who chose us to lead and to serve. It means we listen and we act responsibly and decisively in response to what people tell us. We have looked beyond the legendary Green Book of bold but many unsubstantiated claims of infrastructure projects fabricated and built, but in those beautiful pages of our predecessor's 2016 campaign. We have also heard the echoing calls of the people from across the country since the Green Book was commissioned, and their cries are to have their roads fixed. My message to all those WhatsApp videos of bad roads is this: we have heard you, we have seen them, and we are sending over the motor graders, wheel loaders, asphalt mixing plants, and road roller machines to fix your community roads, farm gate roads, and highways. We will certainly not be able to do them all within this 4-year span, but we have planned for them and have found the money to do far more than what the Green Book authors achieved. Fellow Ghanaians, I wish to plead with you and assure you to bear with us, for your obeying government, the Akufo-Addo government, will fix your roads, and we shall fix them not with words and pictures. Mr. Speaker, our underlying strategy is to grow the economy and to do so aggressively, prudently, broadly, and sustainably. This is because we know that we cannot meet the needs and aspirations of our people if we do not fix and build a strong, dynamic, and confident economy. But we cannot also build if we don't manage the growth of our expenditure and maintain the discipline and integrity that are needed to protect the public purse. We believe that every generation must pay its own share of recurrent expenditure. So for recurrent spending on education, healthcare, security, and other social spending, we should not be borrowing, as that unfairly shifts the burden on future generations. We also know that even for infrastructure spending, there is still a limit as to how much we can borrow at any given time. We are improving revenue generation. The restructuring of the Ghana Revenue Authority and the measures we have put in place to automate processes at the ports are already yielding positive results. We see a new sense of responsibility from those entrusted with collecting our taxes, and we know that they will make this country proud by keeping the tax gates and ensuring that we raise the necessary tax revenues to continue to effectively fund priority programs for the benefit of all Ghanaians. We are also determined not to spare the rod on those who offend our revenue mobilization efforts. 3 months ago, Mr. Speaker, I came here together with my colleague, John Peter Meu, to ask for approval, it's about 6 months ago, for the amended petroleum agreement for AGM Petroleum in the South Deepwater Tunnel Block. Since then, the Norwegian oil company has drilled 2 wells in the block, 2 more than the number of wells drilled under the previous administration. And just 2 weeks ago, AGM announced that they had discovered oil in an area called Blessing. This comes barely 6 months after ACA announced that it had discovered oil after a mightily successful drilling exercise in the Deepwater Tunnel Cape 3 Points block, which was reported as the biggest find in Africa. The future is indeed brighter. All that I can say, Mr. Speaker, is that we thank God for his blessings on Ghana. Mr. Speaker, in line with our objective for 2019, government is implementing a number of programs to revamp economic and social infrastructure to support industry, facilitate business development, and deliver social services. Mr. Speaker, our industrialization and agricultural modernization drive is on track and transforming Ghana. Our social protection and intervention programs have seen major expansion and efficiency gains. Mr. Speaker, government's flagship free SHS program has changed the course of this nation forever, and posterity will thank the President. And posterity will thank the President of the Republic of Ghana, His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, for making it possible for our young people to realize their future dreams and aspirations through free education. Access to secondary school education has never been higher. The innovative temporary double-track system currently being implemented has helped to accommodate the numbers, affording each child the possibility of accessing secondary education. Government has responded to this increased demand for facilitated infrastructure delivery. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to announce that 2 schemes, National Housing and Mortgage Scheme and Affordable Housing Real Estate Investment Trust, under the Decent Homes, Better Life initiative, have commenced. This initiative will provide quality, affordable housing for Ghanaians, starting with public and civil servants. Mr. Speaker, the remarkable achievements over the 31 months have been noticed even beyond the shores of Ghana, setting the right tone for attracting massive support for Ghana to win the bid to host the Secretariat of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. This is the first time Ghana is hosting a continental Africa institution, African Union institution. AFCFTA is an institution covering all African countries with a population of 1.2 billion and a GDP of 2.5 trillion US dollars. The institution will spur trade and economic growth in Africa, and with Ghana hosting the Secretariat, this will advance our goal of becoming a regional economic hub. Last Thursday, I participated in the investor conference of the Ghana Trade Fair Site Redevelopment Project, which is aimed at redeveloping the Ghana Trade Fair site into a first-class international convention and exhibition center, supported by other infrastructure such as world-class hotels, retail facilities, fintech space, and offices. The facility, when completed, will support international events generated by opportunities such as Ghana hosting the AFCFTA Secretariat. The Trade Fair Redevelopment Project, which is already in motion, is estimated to inject about $2 billion in private sector investment into the economy and generate thousands of jobs for the people of Ghana, especially the community around the facility. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the significant progress we have made so far, the serious challenges we are facing in the energy sector pose grave financial risk to the whole economy. At the heart of these challenges are the obnoxious take-or-pay contracts signed by the NDC, which obligate us to pay for capacity we do not need. Currently, according to the Energy Commission, our installed capacity of over 5,000 megawatts is almost double our peak demand of around 2,700 megawatts. Notably, 2,300 megawatts of the installed capacity has been contracted on a take-or-pay basis. This means that we are contractually, Mr. Speaker, obliged to throw away money for this excess capacity which we do not consume. This has resulted in us paying over $500 million US of over 2.5 billion annually for power generation capacity that we do not need. Similarly, for gas, Ghana has contracted for around 750 million scf per day by 2023. This is even after this government terminated 2 other LNG contracts in 2017. Current demand is around 250 million scf per day, and this is projected to rise to between 450 and 550 million scf per day by 2023. About 640 million scf of the contracted gas supply is on a take-or-pay basis, Mr. Speaker, meaning we have to pay whether we use it or not. From 2020, if nothing is done, we will be facing annual excess capacity charges of between $550 million and $850 million every year. Thankfully, Mr. Speaker, we have a plan to deal with this. Mr. Speaker, we cannot allow this situation to continue. There is no doubt that the situation in the energy sector is shocking the economy. We are in a state of emergency and must therefore respond with urgency and boldness. We shall, from August 1st, 2019, Mr. Speaker, with the support of Parliament, make take-or-pay contracts a beast of the past. Mr. Speaker, the 12 June 2019 ruling of the Supreme Court has defined the total revenues of Ghana, of which the DACF shall be allotted 5%. Mr. Speaker, this judgment will bring an end to the long-standing convention that had developed since the beginning of the Fourth Republic. The Ministry of Finance has written to and is working with the Ministry of Justice and the Attorney General to implement the judgment. Mr. Speaker, we are proud of our relationship with labor and employers. Our social partnership agreement would enable a peaceful and shared prosperity with labor and employers. We can and must protect wages. Together, we shall maintain We shall maintain macroeconomic stability and revitalize industry and services. We all deserve decent wages, and we will work with labor employers to ensure that. Mr. Speaker, at the time of presenting the 2019 budget to this August House in November last year, we provided information on macroeconomic developments and outcomes for the first 9 months of the 2018 fiscal year. We now have updated information through to end December 2018. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll proceed to present a summary on the updated macroeconomic developments in 2018. To put this review in perspective, however, I would like to restate the macroeconomic targets for 2018. Overall real GDP growth was projected at 5.6%. Non-oil real GDP growth rate was projected at 5.8%. End period December inflation was projected at 8.9%. Overall budget balance was projected to end in a deficit equivalent to 3.7% of GDP. Primary balance was projected to end in a surplus equivalent to 1.4% of GDP, and gross international reserves was projected to cover at least 3.5 months of imports of goods and services. Mr. Speaker, provisional data released by the Ghana Statistical Service in April 2019 showed that overall real GDP growth, including oil, for 2018 was 6.3%, 0.7 percentage points higher than program, albeit lower than the 2017 performance of 8.1%. Non-oil real GDP also increased from 4.6% in 2017 to 6.5% in 2018 and exceeded the target rate of 5.8%. Mr. Speaker, headline inflation eased to 9.4% in December 2018 from 11.8% in December 2017, mainly on account of steady decline in non-food inflation supported by the relatively tight monetary policy stance maintained throughout the year, as well as a supportive fiscal stance. Non-food inflation fell to 9.8% in December 2018 from 13.6% in December 2016, while food inflation increased to 8.7% in December from 8% over the same period in 2017. Mr. Speaker, in spite of the contraction of private sector credit growth in the first quarter of 2018, private sector credit growth recovered as banking sector liquidity improved, reflecting the impact of the banking sector cleanup and the recapitalization exercise in 2018. Annual growth in private sector credit for 2018 was 10.6% compared to 13.4% growth a year earlier. The share of total outstanding credit to the private sector is still high at 88% in 2018, down from 89.8% in 2017. Total outstanding credit to the private sector at the end of December 2018 was 37.593 billion compared to 33.987 billion cedis recorded in the corresponding period in 2017. Mr. Speaker, in line with Bank of Ghana's objective of anchoring inflationary expectations and ensuring the stability of the domestic currency, the monetary policy rate was lowered further by 300 basis points in 2018 from 20% in 2017 to 18% in March 2018 and further to 17% in June 2018 and remained unchanged for the rest of the year. Average lending rates of banks declined broadly in line with the policy rate of 26.9% in December 2018, down from 29.3% in December 2017. Interest rates on both short-end and medium-term government securities, however, generally trended upwards, particularly in the second half of 2018, reflecting tighter financing conditions. On the external front, the trade balance recorded a surplus in 2018 for the second consecutive year, amounting to 2.7% of GDP, supported by strong performance in crude oil exports, which benefited from both volume and price developments, and non-traditional exports. The current account, however, recorded a deficit of $2.1 billion, 3.2% of GDP in 2018, compared to $2 billion, 3.4% of GDP in 2017. as net outflows from the income account far outweighed the gains from the trade balance. The stock of gross international reserves at the end of December 2018 amounted to $7 billion, sufficient to provide cover for 3.6 months of imports of goods and services, compared to $7.6 billion or 4.3 months of imports of goods and services over the same period in 2017. Mr. Speaker, the Ghana cedi was largely stable against the major currencies in 2018, supported by improved macroeconomic fundamentals and higher foreign exchange inflows. Despite coming under pressure between April and September, the cedi recovered in the last quarter of 2018, reflecting stabilizing global environment and improved foreign flows from the cocoa syndicated loans and remittances, as well as drop in crude oil prices. On the interbank market, the cedi cumulatively depreciated in 2018 by 8.4%, 3.9%, and 3.3%, respectively, against the US dollar, the euro, and the pound sterling, compared to 4.9%, 16.2%, and 12.9% against the US dollar, the euro, and the pound sterling, respectively, in 2017. Mr. Speaker, government's fiscal operations in 2018 were broadly in line with expectations. The fiscal deficit, excluding financial sector resolution costs, declined further from 4.8% of GDP in 2017 to 3.9% in 2018. Altogether, this represents a cumulative decline of 2.6 percentage points of GDP since 2016. For the first time in many years, Mr. Speaker, the country recorded a positive primary balance for the second consecutive year, reaching 1.4% of GDP at the end of 2018. Mr. Speaker, total revenue and grants for the period amounted to $47.6 billion, equivalent to 15.8% of GDP, against the annual program target of $49 billion, or 16.4% of GDP. Although some revenue handles such as personal income tax, corporate income tax, petroleum excise tax, and upstream oil and gas receipts outperformed their respective annual targets, these were not enough to offset higher revenue shortfalls from VAT, international trade taxes, and other non-tax receipts. The key reasons for the shortfall included non-implementation of EPOS, delay in the excise tax stamp policy, lower recorded CI values of imports, non-realization of some program dividends from SOEs, delay in the sale of electromagnetic spectrum, as well as payment of telco license renewal fees. Mr. Speaker, on the expenditure front, total expenditure including arrears clearance for the period was broadly contained within budgetary constraints and amounted to $59.3 billion, 19.7% of GDP, against a target of $60 billion, 20.1% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, given the developments in revenue and expenditure, the overall budget balance registered a deficit of $11.7 billion, or 3.9% of GDP, compared to the target of 3.7% of GDP. The deficit was financed from both domestic and external sources. Total domestic financing amounted to $8.9 billion, equivalent to 3% of GDP, and constituted 84% of total financing. Foreign financing amounted to $2.7 billion, equivalent to 0.9% of GDP, against a target of $4.7 billion, or 1.6% of GDP. The primary balance recorded a surplus of $4.1 billion, equivalent to 1.4% of GDP, compared to the targeted surplus of $4.2 billion, which is also 1.4% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, in line with our fiscal operations, Ghana's gross public debt stock in nominal terms stood at $173.1 billion, or $35.9 billion at the end of 2018. This was made up of $86.2 billion, or $17.9 billion of external debt, and $86.9 billion, or $18 billion of domestic debt. Mr. Speaker, government in 2018 implemented a liability management program focusing on actively managing the public debt portfolio and minimizing refinancing risk in line with approved debt strategy. Leveraging on an improved macroeconomic environment, government earmarked a total amount of $1.25 billion from the proceeds of the 2018 Eurobond of $2 billion for its liability management program as follows. $830 million was used to buy back part of the 2022 Eurobond. This was also the largest liability management exercise by Ghana to date. Buybacks totaling 309 million Ghana cedis were conducted to help smoothing the maturity profile of public domestic debt and reduce refinancing risk. And the maturing two-year domestic U.S. dollar-denominated bond of $94.6 million was fully redeemed, Mr. Speaker. Government also spent $300 million to generate liquidity on the secondary market by buying back some domestic bonds. Consequently, the tenor of the domestic debt was extended to the longer end with an amount of $4.2 billion. Mr. Speaker, I now report on the macroeconomic performance for the first half of 2019. The following macroeconomic targets were set for 2019. Overall real GDP growth of 7.6%, non-oil real GDP growth rate of 6.2%, end period inflation of 8%, overall fiscal deficit of 4.2% of GDP, primary surplus of 1.2% of GDP, and gross international reserve to cover at least 3.5 months of imports. Mr. Speaker, provisional estimates released by the Ghana Statistical Services in April 2019 show that overall real GDP growth recorded a growth rate of 6.7% in the first quarter 2019 compared to 5.4% over the same period in 2018. Growth in the non-oil sector was 6% compared to 4.2% in the corresponding period of 2018. The industry sector recorded a growth rate of 8.4% in the first quarter of 2019 compared to 10.4% during the same period in 2018. Growth in the services sector rebounded strongly to 7.2% in the first quarter of 2019 compared to 1.4% recorded during the same period of 2018, while the agri sector reduced the lowest growth of 2.2% first quarter 2019 compared to 4.7% during the same period in 2018. Mr. Speaker, in spite of the progress made to contain inflationary pressures over the past 24 months, headline inflation rose gradually from 9% in January to 9.5% in April, reflecting pass-through effects of the currency depreciation during the period. Inflation, however, declined gradually to 9.4% in May and further to 9.1% in June 2019. In line with the disinflation process, the Bank of Ghana policy rate was further reduced by 100 basis points to 16% in January 2019 and has since remained unchanged. Over the first half, the 91-day Treasury bill rate rose to 14.8% in June 2019 from 14.6% in December 2018. Similarly, the rate on the 182-day bills also increased to 15.2% from 15% for the comparative period. Mr. Speaker, the recapitalization exercise undertaken by Bank of Ghana, which sought to increase the stated minimum capital of banks from $120 million to $400 million, ended in December 2018 with a total of 23 banks meeting the requirements. Following the cleanup exercise, total assets of the banking sector increased by over 12% between June 2018 and June 2019. Total deposits also increased by over 22% during this period. With the rebound of the sector, banks are now poised to deploy their newly injected capital towards financial intermediation to aid the development process. Asset quality has also improved, as reflected in the declining non-performing loans ratio from 22.6% in June 2018 to 18.1% June 2019. There was also significant improvements in the bank's profitability indicators. Mr. Speaker, on the external front, provisional trade balance for the first half of 2019 show an improved trade surplus of 2.8% of GDP compared to a surplus of 1.9% of GDP in the first half of 2018. As a result, the current account recorded a marginal surplus in the first half of 2019, the first in recent times. Coupled with the significant inflows recorded by the capital and financial accounts, the overall balance of payment yielded, Mr. Speaker, a surplus of 1.9% of GDP over the review period, compared with a deficit of 0.6% of GDP recorded during the same period last year. The positive development in the external sector contributed significantly to improvements in the stock of gross international reserves to 9.9 billion at end March 2019, enough to pay for over 5 months of import of goods and services before declining to 4.3 months import cover at the end of June 2019, largely on account of energy-related debt payments and higher repatriation obligations occasioned by domestic debt interest and coupon repayments to non-resident domestic debt holders. Mr. Speaker, after experiencing some temporary pressures in February 2019, the Ghana cedi largely stabilized towards the end of the first quarter of 2019 on account of improved supply of foreign exchange, partly from the recent Eurobond issue. The cedi experienced a cumulative depreciation of 8.4% in the year to June 2019, compared to 2.4% for the corresponding period of 2018. Against the pound sterling and the euro, the cedi cumulatively depreciated by 7.6% and 7.9% respectively. Mr. Speaker, provisional fiscal data for the first half of 2019 showed that revenue mobilization fell short of target due mainly to shortfalls in customs receipts and non-oil, non-tax revenues. Although expenditures were broadly within target, the pace of execution was faster due mainly to the need to accommodate some armed program and expenses on regional border security. Mr. Speaker, these developments pushed our financing requirements above the program limits for the period to enable us to address these additional expenditure pressures. Consequently, the fiscal deficit for the period widened from a target of 2.9% of GDP to 3.3%. Mr. Speaker, total revenue and grants for the first half of the year amounted to 22.8 compared to the program target of 27 billion, resulting in a shortfall of 15.5%. This, however, represents a nominal increase of 7.8% over the corresponding period in 2018.
The time and the state of business before the House, under Order 140, sub 3, I order that business continues beyond the regular hours. Honorable Minister, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Non-oil tax revenue comprising taxes on income and property, goods and services, and international trade, though 9.4% below target for the first half of 2019, represents an annual increase of 14.7%, with the exception of domestic VAT, petroleum excise taxes, domestic national health insurance levy, and get fund levy, all of which outperformed their respective targets for the period. Most revenue lines underperformed their respective targets for the period, but are expected to recover in the second half of the year. Mr. Speaker, total expenditures, including arrears clearance, amounted to 34.2 billion for the period compared to the program target of 36.8 billion. Mr. Speaker, key expenditures were well contained during the period, with the exception of expenses on the use of goods and services, which was 30.1% higher than target, mainly on account of security-related expenses to reinforce our borders. So far, expenses on the free SHS program and some other government flagship programs have remained on track. Mr. Speaker, government's fiscal operations resulted in a cash deficit of 3.3% of GDP compared with a program target of 2.9% of GDP for the half year. Mr. Speaker, a significant portion of the deficit was financed from foreign sources, 81.3%, including proceeds from the 2019 Eurobond issuance, which raised a total of $3 billion in 7-year, 12-year, and 31-year Eurobonds of $750 million, $1.25 billion, and $1 billion, respectively. Domestic financing of the deficit, including market operation, constituted a remaining 18.7%. The primary balance recorded a deficit equivalent to 0.8% of GDP against a deficit target of 0.1% of GDP for the period. Mr. Speaker, the gross public debt stock in nominal terms stood at $204 billion as at end of June 2019, representing 59.2% of GDP. The increase was mainly as a result of front-loading the financing requirements for 2019 in the first quarter. Debt accumulation in the subsequent quarters is expected to ease downwards and stabilize. The share of the external debt stock increased from 50.2% at end December 2018 to 52.8% at the end of June 2019, mainly driven by the issuance of Eurobonds of $3 billion in March. The IMF also disbursed an amount of SDR 132.4 million SDRs, equivalent to $184.3 million US dollars. In March 2019, after their 7th and 8th reviews of the Extended Credit Facility Program, on account of these two major inflows, a net amount of $2.9 billion US dollars, equivalent to approximately $14.8 billion, was added to the debt stock. The increase in external debt stock amounted to $23.8 billion between December 2018 and June 2019, reflecting a volume transaction of $14.8 billion and exchange rate depreciation of 9 billion Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, in line with the approval of this August House, government did raise a total of $3 billion in the 7, 12-year and 31-year Eurobonds of $750 billion, $1.25 billion, and $1 billion, respectively. The 7-year, 12-year, and 31-year bonds were priced at 7.6875%, 8.125%, and 8.950%, respectively. The 2019 Eurobond issue was significant in two respects, Mr. Speaker. It was the first ever triple tranche Eurobond offering by Ghana and also the largest by sub-Saharan Africa country, excluding South Africa, and the largest and the longest maturity of 31 years in Africa as we trend forward towards our century bond. Mr. Speaker, since the presentation and passage of the 2019 Budget Statement and Economic Policy by this August House in November 2018, we have observed new trends in macroeconomic aggregates which pose fiscal risk and threaten to derail our fiscal efforts if necessary corrective policy measures are not timely applied. Mr. Speaker, among other things, the following developments have warranted a revision to the 2019 macroeconomic framework. Relatively weak performance of the Ghana cedi against the US dollar, driven largely by external pressures, especially in the first quarter of 2019. The Ghana cedi depreciated cumulatively by 8.4% through end June 2019. Lower than program total revenue and grants, faster rate of expenditure execution of 92.2% relative to a revenue mobilization performance rate of 84.5% for the first half year of 2019. Crystallization of energy sector-related contingent liabilities which were not programmed into the 2019 budget and expenditures on regional security-related concerns, and lower than projected crude oil and gas volumes. Mr. Speaker, in view of these developments and consistent with Section 28(2)(d) of Act 921, the 2019 GDP projections, as well as the 2019 fiscal framework, has been revised to safeguard our public finances. Real GDP growth rate has been revised downwards from 7.6% to 7.1% on the back of a relatively larger GDP base for 2018, as well as the lower projected crude oil and gas volumes. Mr. Speaker, to enable government to take precautionary measures in response to emerging regional security concerns arising from developments in the region, the fiscal framework has been recalibrated to accommodate an overall budget deficit equivalent to 4.5% of GDP. This is 0.3 percentage points higher than the fiscal deficit target of 4.2% of GDP approved previously in November 2018 by honorable members. Mr. Speaker, this still remains responsibly below the 5% ceiling we have legally set for ourselves, and we intend to honor it. Mr. Speaker, this notwithstanding, the fiscal outlook for the remaining half of the year remains sound, even in the midst of strong domestic headwinds. The revised 2019 fiscal framework has carefully considered some measures in the second half of the year to safeguard the revised deficit target of 4.5% of GDP. We are therefore confident that the implementation of these fiscal measures will enable government to contain the fiscal deficit within the Fiscal Responsibility Act threshold of 5% of GDP. The fiscal measures are specifically geared towards improving domestic revenue mobilization, reining in expenditures, as well as addressing some critical protracted structural issues in the energy sector. Financing of the fiscal deficit for the second half of the year will be a balanced blend of foreign and domestic financing resources. Expectations are that a World Bank Development Policy Operation Facility, EPO, estimated at $500 million, an increase from $250 million, will be approved by this august House for disbursement in the second half of the year. Domestic financing is expected to moderate in the second half of the year, given the sizable front-loading of financing requirements in the first half of the year, which were funded from this source. Proceeds from the monetization of mineral royalties is also expected to moderate domestic borrowing in the second half. Mr. Speaker, the revised total revenue and grants is $58.9 billion, 0.01 percentage points lower than the original 2019 budget estimate of $58.9049 billion. Of this amount, non-oil tax revenue projected at $43.1 billion and is expected to be boosted by stronger performance from higher corporate income taxes, petroleum excise taxes, and domestic VAT in the second half of the year. The effect of the reduction in the benchmark import values, which became effective from April 2019, will be mitigated by enhanced trade tax compliance following the introduction of additional efficiency measures at the ports, including operations by MPS Limited. Non-tax revenues are expected to be enhanced by the proceeds from the sale of electromagnetic spectrum, as well as fees from the renewal of telcos. Mr. Speaker, total expenditures, including arrears clearance for the year, is now estimated to be $74.6 billion, about 1.6% higher than the 2019 budget estimate of $73.4 billion. Upward adjustments to interest payments reflect partly the effect of a higher exchange rate than programmed, as well as higher net domestic borrowings to meet some regional emergency security and energy expenses in the first half of the year. Additionally, upward adjustment in projected expenditures for goods and services are to meet critical expenses on security, among others. Mr. Speaker, the revised overall budget deficit is therefore programmed at 4.5% of GDP. This deficit target is consistent with our debt sustainability analysis for 2019 and the medium term. The estimated World Bank DPO facility of $500 million and the proceeds from the monetization of mineral royalties are expected to moderate domestic borrowing in the second half of the year. Mr. Speaker, the crystallization of energy sector contingent liabilities in respect of take-or-pay contract obligations of independent power producers, estimated at $5.1 billion for 2019, is being amortized, thus increasing the requirements for external amortization above the amount originally provisioned for in the 2019 budget. Mr. Speaker, as a result of these revisions to the 2019 fiscal framework, the 2019 appropriation of $78,771,833,602.12 cedis that was approved by this August House in November 2018 will not be adequate to cater for the additional program needs, which would increase the total appropriation to $85,142,189,527.4 cedis. Government is therefore requesting honorable members to consider and approve an amount of $6,370,355,925.82 million cedis as supplementary estimates to the original appropriation of $708,771,833,602.12 million to bring the revised total appropriation for the 2019 fiscal year to 85.1 billion Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, consistent with Article 179(8) of the Constitution, the request for a supplementary estimate is necessitated by additional precautionary expenditures in response to regional security developments and the amortization of contingent liabilities associated with take-or-pay contracts in the energy sector which have crystallized. Mr. Speaker, revenue measures, including the sale of an electromagnetic spectrum, telco license renewal, gains to be derived from the realization of assets and mineral rights, and strengthening of compliance at the ports and others, are being pursued vigorously to ensure that the revised domestic revenue target for 2019, which is some $8.3 billion below the original budget projection, is not compromised. Mr. Speaker, as part of government resolve to ensure that the 2019 budget is implemented as planned, the following additional revenue measures are being proposed for the consideration and approval by honorable members. Energy sector levies. The Energy Sector Levies Act 2015, Act 899, restructured, rationalized, and consolidated all the revenue legislation relating to the energy sector into one law. The object was to dedicate the levies to the energy sector and to promote prudent and efficient utilization of the revenue, as well as facilitate sustainable long-term investments in the energy sector to enhance availability, regularity, and reliability of supply. The dedication of these consolidated levies was to improve the poor balance sheets of the power sector utilities and relieve government of the pressures of the sector in terms of reduced reliance on Ministry of Finance occasional direct funding. The sector, however, continues to be exposed due to the recurring debts and the inherited take-or-pay contracts. At the inception of the Act, it was estimated that approximately 24% of the expand price of fuel will adequately cover the required financing. This percentage has dwindled over the years and is currently about 17% due to inflation and currency depreciation. With this mid-year review, Mr. Speaker, government is proposing an upward adjustment in the road fund levy, the energy debt recovery levy, and the price stabilization and recovery levy to bring the ratios close to 21% to help bridge the financing requirements. Communication service tax. The communication service tax was introduced in 2008 at an ad valorem rate of 6%. The tax is levied on charges payable by consumers for the use of communication services. Government proposes to increase the tax. Government proposes to increase the tax to 9% to develop the foundation for the creation of a viable technology ecosystem in the country from 6%. This will comprise, among others, putting in systems to identify and combat cybercrime, protect users of information technology, and combat money laundering and other financial crimes. The increase will not be earmarked, however. The sharing ratio will be adjusted in such a manner that the National Youth Employment Program continue to receive the same proportion as they are currently receiving. Mr. Speaker, review of luxury vehicles levy. Government in 2018 introduced the luxury vehicles levy to raise revenue. We have noted suggestions from the general public on the implementation of this tax, and Mr. Speaker, as a listening government, we are proposing to the House the withdrawal of the luxury tax levy. We will, Mr. Speaker. We will, Mr. Speaker, continue. We will, Mr. Speaker, continue to improve compliance.
We all decided no placards. I'm reminding you gently, which of course reflects also in our standing orders. If you don't remember, I'm reminding you. And we shall go by our own understandings. Honorable, you may please go.
We will, Mr. Speaker, continue to improve compliance, expand the tax net, and explore other innovative sources of raising revenue. Mr. Speaker, on the energy sector, I am happy to reaffirm that Dumso is history. And we are, Mr. Speaker, determined to ensure that it remains that way. However, we are facing serious challenges in the energy sector that, Mr. Speaker, pose grave financial risk to the whole economy. At the heart of these challenges, Mr. Speaker, are the obnoxious take-or-pay contracts signed by the NDC, which obligate us to pay for capacity we do not need. We must urgently, Mr. Speaker, address these challenges to protect the hard-earned economic gains we have made in the past 2.5 years and continue with our economic growth and job agenda to improve the lives of Ghanaians. Mr. Speaker, this supplementary budget therefore proposes a number of bold measures to confront the issues to ensure that the energy sector delivers the services required by Ghanaians while maintaining financial viability. To be specific, Mr. Speaker, the two main issues confronting the sector are, firstly, the excess electricity generation which was procured during the NDC regime from independent power producers, including emergency power producers, at exorbitant prices under flawed take-or-pay contracts. Currently, according to the Energy Commission, the country has installed power generation capacity of 5,083 megawatts, dependable capacity of 4,593 megawatts, and peak demand, Mr. Speaker, of around 2,700 megawatts. So, Mr. Speaker, our installed capacity is almost double our peak demand. Notably, 2,300 megawatts of the installed capacity has been contracted on a take-or-pay basis. On average, Mr. Speaker, less than 40% of the contracted take-or-pay capacity is actually used, meaning that we are basically throwing away money by paying for the remaining 60% of excess capacity, which we do not actually consume. In monetary terms, what this means is that we are paying over $500 million US, or over 2.5 billion Ghana cedis annually for power generation capacity that we do not need. Regarding gas, Ghana has contracted for around 750 million scf per day by 2023. Current demand is around 250 million scf per day, and this is projected to rise to between 450 and 550 million scf per day by 2023. All things being equal, there is projected oversupply of 200 to 300 million scf per day by 2023. About 640 million scf a day of the contracted gas supply is on take-or-pay basis, meaning we have again to pay whether we use it or not. From 2020, we'll be facing annual excess gas capacity charges of between 550 million and 850 million each year. Currently, for Sankofa Offshore Cape 3 Points gas alone, Mr. Speaker, we pay $51 million a month under a take-or-pay contract for 154 million scf per day, even though we only take 60 million scf per day on average. Additionally, there are still other challenges in the energy sector, including electricity tariffs that do not cover the cost of non-portfolio power purchase agreements, low collection, high technical and commercial losses, absence of a proper system for measuring and paying for the cost of power for street lighting, non-payment of utility bills by MDAs, and a high level of net sector arrears of 2.7 billion as of January 2019. Mr. Speaker, the total cost in the energy sector that government had to cover in 2018 amounted to $520 million. However, by end June this year, government had made total payments of $604 million US, equivalent to Ghana 3.14 billion. And if we do not urgently address the problems in the sector, the projected government payments in 2019 will be at least US $1 billion, 5.2 billion Ghana cedis. Our top technical experts, assisted by counterparts from the World Bank, have subjected the energy sector to a thorough analysis and produced the Energy Sector Reform Program, which identifies the key issues in the sector and proposes solutions. According to the ESRP, which has been approved by Cabinet, if we continue with business as usual in the energy sector, the cost to government will increase over time to an accumulated total of over $12.5 billion by 2023. Mr. Speaker, our macroeconomic stability and the hard-earned economic gains we have made are at serious risk of being derailed if we do not immediately take drastic steps to arrest these reprehensible legacy issues in the energy sector. Just to put this in context, the over $1 billion equivalent extraordinary payment that government is having to make in the energy sector this year and on an ongoing basis, if not addressed, is more than 2 times the amount of all government social expenditure on goods and services, which includes free SHS, our school feeding program, our LEAP program. It is no wonder, therefore, that the NDC was convinced that we could not fund President Akufo-Addo's free SHS program, but the Lord has found a way for this nation. Mr. Speaker, in addition, these wasteful expenditures in the energy sector are one of the main causes of increases in end-user electricity tariffs, imposing hardships on Ghanaians. Similarly, These tariffs makes Ghana uncompetitive for manufacturing, thus holding back our industrialization and job creation agenda. What is more, these wasteful payments are putting pressure on our foreign currency reserves and on the exchange rate. Mr. Speaker, in investment banking parlance, the NDC government's parting shot was an energy sector poison pill. But, Mr. Speaker, we are determined that the good people of Ghana will not drink this hemlock. Mr. Speaker, we cannot allow this situation to continue. There is no doubt that the situation in the energy sector is shocking the economy and creating a state of emergency. And indeed, as in the case of what we have done in the financial sector, we must respond with the urgency and boldness dictated by the situation. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, government has resolved as follows: to convert all take-or-pay contracts to take-and-pay contracts. Accordingly, starting August 1st, 2019, government is to pay for energy and gas that we actually consume. All take-or-pay contracts will be renegotiated to convert to take-and-pay for both PPAs and gas supply agreements. Government will seek, of course, Mr. Speaker, parliamentary ratification where appropriate. We have resolved, Mr. Speaker, to suspend indefinitely or terminate all PPAs currently under negotiation, to immediately place a complete moratorium on signing new PPAs and put-call option agreements, to subject all future PPAs to competitive and transparent procurement procedures. Government will therefore no longer entertain any unsolicited proposals, to implement the economic merit order dispatch, which means that the most efficient power plants will be dispatched first, to improve the performance of the distribution utility, and we have agreed with the concessionaire a plan to reduce electricity losses and increase collections based on an agreed investment plan, to also significantly shift in the medium term the energy mix to gas and renewables, to implement the recommendation of the Economic Sector Recovery Program as approved by Cabinet, and to mandate the Energy Sector Task Force as constituted by Cabinet based on the recommendation in the ESRP to ensure and oversee the implementation of the Sector Recovery Program. Mr. Speaker, this will completely change our energy sector. Mr. Speaker, you may recall that government in 2017 issued the Energy Sector Levy Act, Excellent Bond, which has to date raised almost 6 billion Ghana cedis on the back of ESLA levies to pay for legacy debts from the NDC's doomsday days. The bond produced were used to liquidate approximately 60% of the energy sector legacy debts. Government proposes to increase the energy sector levy by 20 Ghana pesos per litre for petrol and diesel, and 8 pesos per kilogram for LPG, so as to increase the inflows to enable government issue additional bonds to pay down our energy sector debt obligations that we inherited from the NDC. Based on current indicated prices for petrol and diesel, this translates to Ghana pesos 90 Ghana pesos per gallon. In addition to the above, government is also taking steps to, 1, relocate the car power ship to Takoradi to immediately utilize Sankofa gas, increase power exports by extending the grid to other West African countries, streamline management of street lighting to ensure accountability and transparency in billing and payments, increase productive uses of electricity and natural gas to spur industrialization, and engage gas suppliers with a view to reducing the price of natural gas. Mr. Speaker, these new measures will build on the earlier ones we have already taken over the past 2.5 years, which include termination of the Quantum Gas project in 2017, termination of the Takoradi LNG projects, ADM with Adom WAGL in the process of being terminated, renegotiation of the Ameri PPA in 2018 to reduce costs by 13%, renegotiation of the capacity charge under the Senate PPA, which has resulted in a 31% reduction in conversion of the PPA from take-or-pay to take-and-pay 2019, and deferment of 8 and termination of 2 PPAs in 2017. Mr. Speaker, with the additional measures we are introducing, we are going to clean up and sensitize the energy sector, just as we have been doing in the financial services sector. These two sectors are fundamental to our agenda to grow the economy, create jobs, and bring prosperity to Ghanaians. Our government is strongly supportive of the private sector and believes in fostering a strong legal, regulatory, and enabling environment that supports private sector growth. However, we are not going to jeopardize our future through unbalanced contracts that benefit a few individuals and companies at the expense of the people of Ghana. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, as His Excellency the President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo said in his 61st Independence Day speech on Ghana Beyond Aid, and I quote, "We cannot subordinate the common good to build a prosperous nation to the selfish interests of a few." That is why this government has decided to convert all the take-or-pay contracts to take-and-pay. And in this policy orientation, Mr. Speaker, we are fully inspired by the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, whose famous letter from a Birmingham jail reminds us, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, "One who breaks an unjust law must do so openly, lovingly, and with a willingness to accept the penalty. I submit that an individual who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust and who willingly accepts the penalty to arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice is in reality, Mr. Speaker, expressing the highest respect for law." Mr. Speaker, take-or-pay contracts will be a thing of the past in our country. We are determined, Mr. Speaker, to fight for Ghana. The road to Ghana Beyond Aid, Mr. Speaker, will require a spirit of courage, love, and self-discipline. Indeed, President Akufo-Addo's government remains resolute in upholding the common good and shared participation in Ghana's prosperity. Mr. Speaker, Ghana should resonate among all of us. Ghana First should resonate among all of us as one people with a common destiny. Mr. Speaker, the soundness of our financial system is essential for achieving macroeconomic stability and growth. In addition, for providing substantial employment, banks, specialized deposit-taking institutions, and fund management companies as providers of credit, liquidity, and investment play a critical role in the effective functioning of our economy. Mr. Speaker, the Bank of Ghana's bold and heroic measures over the past 2 years to clean up the banking and SDI sectors involved the revocation of licenses of 9 universal banks, 347 microfinance companies, of which 155 had already ceased operation, and 39 microcredit companies, money lenders, 10 of which had already ceased operation. These massive failures, Mr. Speaker, brought about by several years of an unsustainable licensing regime which lowered standards for entry into the banking and SDI sectors, as well as poor supervision and enforcement from the central bank. This was compounded by poor corporate governance and risk management practices, family and friends managing and influencing banks, abuse of related party relations, and unsustainable business models. Many of these institutions, Mr. Speaker, had denied depositors access to their deposits for a long period of time, creating liquidity challenges in the financial system, resulting in a high incidence of credit defaults in the system. The threats posed to the stability of the financial system and the economy at large were enormous justifying the bold actions taken by the governor and the Bank of Ghana. The government has demonstrated its commitment to providing timely relief to depositors whose funds were at risk as a result of the demise of the defunct banks and SDIs. The government, through a purchase and assumption program, facilitated GCB's consolidation of 2 banks. The government then set up the Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited and capitalized it with $450 million to ensure that no depositor lost their deposit. The government of Ghana has had to issue bonds to the tune of $11.2 billion to cover the cost of the financial sector resolution and protect depositors. In addition, Mr. Speaker, Government of Ghana had provided an amount of $925 million in cash to cover the small depositors of the 386 microfinance institutions, bringing the total cost to $12.125 billion. Mr. Speaker, the government's actions have restored some confidence in the banking sector. Through the government interventions, significant deposits held by, Mr. Speaker, some 2,655,100 depositors, 1.5 million bank depositors, and 1.12 microfinance depositors have been saved, and over 3,000 jobs have also been preserved. The Bank of Ghana's directive to banks to increase the minimum capital paid up of $400 million by 31st December 2018 has been successful. This injected fresh capital of some $4.2 billion into the banks. The Ghana Amalgamated Trust intervention is also expected to lead to strong intervention for indigenous Ghanaian presence in the banking sector. Mr. Speaker, it is gratifying to note that these regulatory and policy measures undertaken to clean up the financial sector have already begun to bear fruit. Some have suggested that instead of revoking the licenses of the now defunct institutions, the Bank of Ghana should have kept them going somehow. Some have even said that the previous regime was the good doctor that allowed these zombie institutions to continue, albeit in their comatose state, and will not do intensive and intrusive surgery, while the current administration is a bad doctor that came in to kill or collapse them. However, first of all, at the state at which the current administration found the banking and SDI sector, it was too late to subject the already comatose financial institution, and intensive and intrusive surgery was required for the many walking dead. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the failure of these institutions was caused primarily by poor governance, lax oversight by boards of directors and the Banking Supervision Division, unlawful behavior of shareholders and related and connected parties who had plundered these banks' deposits and resources. Thirdly, continuing to support these failing institutions would have been creating a moral hazard for bank shareholders, directors, and managers whose actions or inactions would have been rewarded by the taxpayer. By revoking the licenses of these insolvent institutions, the Bank of Ghana was acting according to its legal imperative and did so in a manner that preserved depositors' funds, saved a significant amount of jobs. And let me be very clear here, Mr. Speaker. We were at the precipice of a major fiscal meltdown, and let no one indulge in self-serving oratory. The end cost, Mr. Speaker, may be anywhere from US $3 to $4 billion equivalent, a poison pill from the previous government that we are having to clean up. Mr. Speaker, the liquidation of the defunct institutions is progressing, albeit with impediments from persons whose unlawful actions were associated with the failure of these institutions, having the audacity to seek legal cover. The government financial interventions in the cleanup exercise were only a stopgap measure necessary to help mitigate the socioeconomic impacts of the failure of the relevant financial institutions. It is imperative that we all support the recovery of assets from persons who misappropriated or borrowed funds from these institutions and have failed or refused to pay back in order that the liabilities left behind can be settled. To the extent of any recoveries made by the receivers of these institutions, government expects to recoup these amounts it has spent so far to provide relief to depositors. This will go a long way, Mr. Speaker, to enable government finance other priorities for our socio-economic needs. Mr. Speaker, government continues to support effective regulation of the financial sector. We are confident the Financial Stability Council, recently established and inaugurated by His Excellency the President, will work assiduously to promote a resilient financial system that supports our economic growth agenda. We are also fully committed to supporting the organization of the Ghana Deposit Protection Scheme in September 2019 to further protect the interests of depositors. Mr. Speaker, as announced in the 2018 budget, the government has started the National Housing and Mortgage Finance Initiative. The objective of this initiative, Decent Homes, Better Life, is to provide quality housing to all citizens, starting with public and civil servants. Two of the schemes under the initiative, National Housing and Mortgage Scheme and Affordable Housing Real Estate Trust, have commenced. Mr. Speaker, under the NHMS, funds have been released to 3 participating banks, GCB Bank, Stanbic, and Republic Bank, to commence the pilot phase of the Housing and Mortgage Program. The NHMS, in collaboration with the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations, is building a pipeline of potential home owners to participate in the scheme. Mr. Speaker, in line with the President's vision encapsulated in the Coordinated Program of Economic and Social Development and the Medium-Term Development Plan Agenda for Jobs, Creating Prosperity and Equal Opportunity for All Ghanaians, government is pursuing various policy interventions and flagship programs to pave the way for accelerated socio-economic transformation of this country. These are consistent with Ghana Beyond Aid Agenda, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and the African Agenda 2063. The priority programs are intended to be catalysts for building a strong economy for stimulating job creation. Mr. Speaker, I would like to highlight a few of these. Agriculture modernization. Mr. Speaker, the government's agriculture modernization program aims at ensuring reliable production of agricultural produce, which will be the basis of our industrialization, job creation, and export drive, as well as help reduce the amount of foreign exchange spent on imports. These are being delivered through our flagship initiatives, Planting for Food and Jobs Program, the Rearing for Foods and Jobs Program, and Planting for Exports and Rural Development, among others. Mr. Speaker, since the onset of the Planting for Food and Jobs Program in 2017, domestic food production has increased significantly. Maize yields increased by 72%, rice by 24%, and soybean by 39%, and sorghum by 100%. Mr. Speaker, as of June 2019, under the fertilizer and seed subsidy component of the program, about 40% of targeted farmers have been covered, comprising only farmers in the southern sector, since the northern sector planting season is yet to start. Construction of 30 warehouses with a capacity of 1,000 metric tons each are underway across the country to provide storage facilities and reduce post-harvest losses. As at the end of June, 5 warehouses have been completed at Kwame Danso, Bole, Yagba, Joji, and Chindiri. Mr. Speaker, in this year, His Excellency the President launched the Rearing for Food and Jobs Program. To date, a total of 53,500 livestock have been distributed to some beneficiary farmers. With regard to
all the honorable members, background noise.
With regard to the management of fall armyworm infestation as of May 2019, a total farm area of 34,396 hectares was sprayed and recovered. Mr. Speaker, The greenhouse village of Danwenya has trained a total of 231 students. The new facility at Akumadan has been completed, with training scheduled to start in the third quarter of the year. The Bourgeoisie greenhouse will be completed by year end. Under the first phase of the project, each facility, Mr. Speaker, will produce 325,200 kilograms of assorted vegetables, valued at over 6.4 million cedis. The ministry, Mr. Speaker, completed the Gua and Piriyuri dams, making available 36 hectares of irrigable land for cropping. Mr. Speaker, government is aggressively pursuing its industrialization agenda with the objective of widening the opportunities for job creation and expanding the economy through accelerated technology based on manufacturing and aggressive export promotion. Mr. Speaker, the 1D1S initiative was designed to support the private sector to establish at least one industrial enterprise in every district. Currently, Mr. Speaker, 181 projects are at various stages of implementation spread over 110 districts across the 16 regions of the country. As of mid-year, 57 projects were in operation, providing 10,753 direct jobs and 43,000 indirect jobs. A total of $430 million, Mr. Speaker, has been mobilized from local financial institutions to support the program. Further, government has sourced external funding and credit lines in the sum of $700 million to address access to financing challenges. Exim banks of $300 million from the U.S. Bank will help accelerate 1D1F programs. Mr. Speaker, with the private sector needed to collaborate with us, a number of modern industrial parks and special economic zones are being promoted. The following parks are currently under development. The Dawa Industrial Park at Dawa on the Accra Flower Highway currently has 2,000 acres fully developed out of 22,000 acres available land. West Park Industrial Estate at Shama in the Western region is constructing on-site infrastructure for its 400-acre industrial park. Mr. Speaker, the Ghana Integrated Aluminium Development Corporation successfully launched a 3-round investor engagement process in March 2019. Round 1 of the investor engagement covering mining, refining, melting, and power was concluded, and 16 firms were shortlisted to progress to Round 2, which will be launched in August. The investor engagement will be completed by year end. Mr. Speaker, government seeks to ensure rapid expansion of infrastructure in an integrated manner in order to transform the economic and social lives of Ghanaians. Mr. Speaker, in the 2019 budget statement and economic policy, government made a commitment to undertake massive infrastructure development from a variety of funding sources. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to announce that 4 out of 10 projects to benefit from the first phase of the final hydro facility has commenced. His Excellency the President cut the sword for the Tamale interchange on 10th April 2019. Mr. Speaker, this past weekend, the Tamale interchange project is in full operation. The other 3 projects, namely Western Region and Cape Coast Inner City Roads, selected feeder roads in Ashanti, Western, and the Hohoi, Jasikan, Dode, Pepase, are the design phase. The second phase of the Sino Hydro project is at the planning stage. An additional 1,300 kilometers of road, 3 interchanges, and 69 steel bridges are under consideration for implementation. Mr. Speaker, the people of the Upper East region will be happy to learn that financing arrangements have been completed for the restart of the Bolgatanga-Boku-Pomakrom Road in a few weeks. Mr. Speaker, in order to improve the road conditions and protect lives and properties across the country, government has programmed a number of projects to commence in the course of this year. The projects include Osiem Begro Road, Waben Abomosu Eswom Road, Awiankwanta Boasi Road, Mankon Kofiasi Road, Kwabie Kropon Town Roads, Insuta Beposu Road, Salaga Bimbela, Kwada Sutra Brom, Adankroma Kede New Abrim, Atronim Mem, Esuom Subi Kede, Ekropon Kramkesi Adankrono, Odumasi Adenta Bedu, Akrodia Seriasu, Idiako Kasapim Kam 15, Tepaboma, Kofi Chrome, Obuasi Town Roads, New Doma, Yahuam Roads, Menjibwe, Sampa Jinin, Doma Town, Atebubu Kwame Danso, Kintampo Abiasi Prang, Atebubu Chiso Praso Asing, Swedro Bojoase, Ayamfuri Jachi Chrome, New Abrem Fuasi Kuma, Suhum Asama Kesi Town, Wumpuru, Narerogo, Wolugo, Prema Misia, Zabzugu, Napela, Bimbela, Salaga, Pambajo. Mr. Speaker, Apostle Junction, Boni Valley, Kushiego, Banda, Nalarego. Mr. Speaker, Sefi, Dunamaso, Insrowa, Asawanaso, Kojina, Esakron, and Mr. Speaker, Bibiani, and Awaso Town Roads. Mr. Speaker, for the 2018-2019 crop year, an amount of 1.3 billion was raised in the syndicated loan market at a margin of LIBOR plus 60 basis points. This loan was raised to fund cocoa purchasing operations and support other key activities in the cocoa sector. Cocoa Port repaid the 1.3 billion syndicated loan ahead of schedule in July 2019. This is due to prudent financial management. For the 2019-2020 season, an amount of 1.3 billion will be syndicated by Cocoa Board for cocoa purchasing operations. Mr. Speaker, the current world cocoa price still remains low since the downward trend experienced in the 2017-2018 year. As a result of the low world market price, cocoa revenues continue to diminish to a level that government had to forfeit its share of the FOB price in export duty payments in the second year running. This is part of government's efforts to protect our cocoa farmers from market price volatility and income uncertainties. Government has, however, kept faith with our cherished cocoa farmers by maintaining the farm gate price at Ghana cedi 7,600 per ton. This is meant to ensure that no loss of income to the cocoa farmer arises due to the low international price of cocoa. During the 2017-2018 season, Cocoa Board purchased 904,000 metric tons of cocoa. For the 2018-2019 season, which is expected to close at the end of September 2019, a crop size of over 900,000 tons was targeted. The current achieved crop size is 794,841 tons, representing 88.32% of the forecast. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the annual syndicated loan of 1.3 billion, Cocoa Board has initiated processes with the African Development Bank to raise additional $600 million 7-year long-term facility for the implementation of the productivity enhancement programs and other initiatives. The programs include hand pollination, pruning of cocoa farms, rehabilitation of disease and overage farms, irrigation in dry seasons, and farmer databases. The loan was at the instance of the joint request made by the President of the Republic of Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire to the AFDB to support the revamping of the cocoa industry in the two countries and put in strategies to take control of the price of cocoa on the international market. Mr. Speaker, the world market price of cocoa dropped from 2,950 tons in 2016 to an average of 2,080 tons in 2017, representing about 30% reduction. Although government continues to pay farmers 7,600 cedis a ton, the world market price has remained low for the past 3 years. In the face of this challenge, Mr. Speaker, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, represented by Cocoa Board and Conseil du Café Cacao, the two leading producers of cocoa beans, 65% of world production, decided to engage buyers of cocoa to accept a premium of $400 per ton above the terminal market price to support the income of our cherished farmers. Mr. Speaker, after extensive stakeholder consultation and engagement, the buyers have accepted to pay the $400 per ton, which is Christian livelihood income differential for Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire cocoa beans. We wish to say that this is the first of its kind in the history of cocoa sales in the world, and it's a major achievement for the government and an indication of the government's indication to seek a fair share of the multi-billion-dollar cocoa value chain market. Mr. Speaker, we should not lose sight of the fact that the cocoa industry directly supports about 800,000 farmer families, and such a major policy would improve significantly the living standards of majority of Ghanaians. Mr. Speaker, works has resumed on cocoa roads involving upgrading routine and periodic maintenance activities of 1,362 kilometers of trunk roads, 1,389 kilometers of feeder roads, and 183 of urban roads. The roads, Mr. Speaker, include Obuasi Junction to Nkwayamfuri, Have Hohoi Road, Have Josican Road, Benchima Junction, Ajuafu Road, Sefirieso Akontombra Road, Cape Coast Tresuprasu Road, and access road to Kakum National Park. Further, 450 feeder roads and 20 trunk roads covering 4,500 kilometers and 500 kilometers respectively have been programmed by Cocoa Board and the Ministry of Roads and Highways for construction, upgrading, rehabilitation, and routine maintenance. Mr. Speaker, they include Odumase Patri Bada Road, Nkrofo Nkwanta Agrave, Akim Manso Osnase, Kwehun Saba Akwase, Akrodie, Asimfusu, Sankore Cocoa Station, Dapa, Asato, Takokoi, Abrokwa, Konongo, Ankasa, Minankwanta, Wasa Kropong, Insuwari, Asuweni, Shama, Guera, Ahumkam, Atieku, Odobeng. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the railway sector continues in its quest to increase railway infrastructure in this country. In this regard, government has initiated several projects in the railway sector. The Ghana Railway Company has completed the rehabilitation of the 30-kilometer narrow-gauge railway line from Accra to Tema, which has enabled the restoration of passenger rail service to the corridor. The Achimota to Nsawam line has also been rehabilitated, and test runs have commenced in anticipation for the regions of the suburban commuter rail service from Accra to Nsawam. Mr. Speaker, the construction of the 22-kilometer standard gauge Kojo-Kro-Manso section of the Western Rail is being undertaken in 2 phases. Mr. Speaker, significant progress has been made in the Tama Impakadan rail line. The status of the project currently stands at about 45% and is expected to be 58% complete by the end of 2019. The scope of the project has been revised to include a major railway bridge across the Volta Lake between Senchi and enters the Volta region at Adom. Mr. Speaker, the old railway training school and 2 workshops located at Secado have received major refurbishment and facelift. The training school is to be upgraded and equipped with modern teaching and learning facilities to enhance capacity building and skills. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to announce that His Excellency the President has cut the sword for the construction of the Axim and Mori fish landing sites. Work on the remaining fish landing sites along the coastal stretch has commenced. These are, Mr. Speaker, Jamestown, Diskoff, Elmina, Mumford, Winneba, Senyabreku, Keta, Gumuafete, and Teshi. Mr. Speaker, our infrastructure for poverty eradication project continues. Our F-dam projects are continuing. 50 prefabricated warehouses have been constructed. 1,000 community mechanized solar-powered water systems will be completed in September, and the construction of 50 rural markets and 2 mechan houses to commence before year end. Mr. Speaker, the Zongo Development Fund seeks, among others, to improve the quality of life in Zongo areas and the inner cities through the provision of critical infrastructure, education, and training. Mr. Speaker, a number of projects are ongoing: construction of water systems, access roads, alleyways, Bailey bridges, schools, and institutional toilets. In addition, Mr. Speaker, infrastructure in the communities, 250 youth in Accra and Kumasi have benefited from this, and 500 women have been trained in entrepreneurship and business development under the Zongo Cuisine Promotion Program. Mr. Speaker, with regards to sanitation and water, the President's vision of making Accra the cleanest city in Africa, and by extension to all the regions, it's going to be executed. Mr. Speaker, to facilitate the proper disposal of solid waste, 2,000 public litter bins are being placed at vantage points in all of Accra, and 3,000 additional to other places. Mr. Speaker, Greater Accra Metropolitan Project, 22,500 household toilets, benefiting 180,000 low-income beneficiaries, and 200,000 school pupils have been completed. The construction of high-capacity storm drains at Kenechi Fertile to address the perennial flooding of the area is also ongoing. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the National Entrepreneurship Innovation Program seeks to improve the entrepreneurial capacity of Ghanaians, particularly the youth, in order to create jobs and also develop an innovative business environment for socio-economic development. Mr. Speaker, under the Green Business Initiative, 75 greenhouses have been built for young entrepreneurs, Mr. Speaker, and 30,000 university students are participating in entrepreneurship clubs across the country. With regards to the Mascot progress, Mr. Speaker, the Mascot loan recovery rate has improved from 22% in 2016 to 65%, and further funds are being found for them. Mr. Speaker, the Free SHF program is currently in its second year of implementation. A total of 432,791 first-year students were enrolled for the 2018-2019 academic year, representing a 19.5% increase over the previous year's figure of 362,108. This brings the total number of beneficiaries, Mr. Speaker, to 794,899 since the inception of the Free SHH program. In September 2019, the third cohort of the senior high school students will be enrolled, Mr. Speaker, making senior high school free for all for the first time in our history. Mr. Speaker, government continues to implement the programs to ensure Ghana achieves universal health coverage, the extension of specialized outreach services to the community levels. Mr. Speaker, due to deliberate government action to improve human resource base in the health sector, the nurse-to-patient ratio in the country has reached 1 to 839, which is superior to the WHO benchmark of 1 to 1,000. Government has also, since 2017, restored the nursing training allowance. The first and quarter allowances for 2019 were paid to a total of 51,000 trainees. Mr. Speaker, the rehabilitation and upgrading of the Tamale Teaching Hospital Project Phase 2 was completed and commissioned in April 2019. The construction and equipping of 5 polyclinics in the Greater Accra region at Adentan, Ashiaman, Botino, Oduman, and Sege was also completed and commissioned in 2019. A number of projects in this sector are also ongoing. Mr. Speaker, under the LEAP program, a total of 330,438 households are receiving LEAP grants. This is an increase over the 213,044 households reported in the 2019 budget, representing a percentage increase of 35%. Currently, Mr. Speaker, the program pays grants to the beneficiaries by monthly as follows. A 1-member household is 64 cedis, 2-member household is 76 cedis, a 3-member household is 88 cedis, and 4-member household is 106 cedis. Mr. Speaker, currently, the school feeding program has increased from 1.6 million in 2016 to 2.6 million pupils in 8,676 primary schools with 1 meal every school-going day. Mr. Speaker, in order to improve the effectiveness and enhance the management of the program, financial and operational controls are being strengthened to reduce waste and improve linkages to the local market. Mr. Speaker, 2020 marks the 10th year since the last census in Ghana, and GSS will commence preparatory work for mapping out enumeration areas in 130 out of the 260 districts in the country. Following the exercise, a total of 21,590 out of the 37,000 enumeration area maps have been updated. The census mapping exercise is expected to be completed by September 2019. Mr. Speaker, the Electoral Commission has completed the limited registration exercise as part of the arrangements for the revision of the voter register for 2020 elections. This will pave the way for exhibition of the voters register and nomination of candidates. In order to ensure the integrity of the electoral process, the Commission is working towards deployment of a modernized biometric registration and verification solution. Mr. Speaker, the Ghana card registration exercise commenced with institutional registration and enrollment in June 2018 to March 2019. The mass registration exercise we started in Accra in April 2019 has so far enrolled, Mr. Speaker, 1,793,207 Ghanaians. A total of 1,195,415 cards have been printed as at the end of June 2019. Mr. Speaker, on 23 September 2017, Ghana successfully defended its maritime boundary dispute with Côte d'Ivoire when the ITLOS ruled in favor of Ghana. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Defense will begin the construction of a modern forward operating base in Takoradi to enhance maritime security in the western corridor of the country. This post part of government's broader security and will afford the Ghana Armed Forces the ability to protect offshore oil assets, prevent and combat pirate activities, narcotic traffic, and other high-sea crimes. Mr. Speaker, the creation of an optimistic, self-confident, and prosperous nation as articulated in the President's Coordinated Program for Economic and Social Development is becoming a reality to the citizens of our dear country. We are indeed moving Ghana beyond aid. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of the 2019 budget is on course. We are ready to take on board the third cohort of free SHS students in September 2019. We have started paying contractors who have certificates valued up to 500,000 cedis and plan to clear these by the end of the year. In keeping with our promise, the referendum to decide on the election of MMDCs will come up in December 2019. We have issued a number of commencement approvals for work to begin on a number of roads, drains, fish landing sites, and housing projects. The relevant ministries and development authorities are expected to complete procurement processes and award contracts for work to begin on all projects for the IPEP programs by October 2019. These programs will generate critical economic activities, provide job opportunities, and improve income for masons, carpenters, food vendors, roads, and general contractors. We have made a significant impact in reducing poverty, Mr. Speaker, bridging inequality gaps, providing adequate and accessible quality education, improving health care, providing affordable housing, promoting a vibrant agriculture sector, and improving food security, ensuring robust security measures, and revitalizing our industries, among others. These priority programs further underscore, Mr. Speaker, government's commitment towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. As part of government's efforts to address the need for improvement in rural roads, government in the coming weeks, Mr. Speaker, government in the coming weeks will set up a committee which would include officers of the 48th Engineers Regiment of the Ghana Armed Forces to spearhead a new national effort of mobilizing local authorities to construct passable critical feeder roads, related drainage, and bridges across the country. Local authorities will be supported to urgently deploy road equipment by assisting with the repairs of any broken down equipment, providing fuel, or renting necessary equipment. We'll work with the ministers for local government and rural development, roads and highways, and the social development initiative to explore all available financing options within the budget. Mr. Speaker, let me once again take the opportunity to thank you for the cordial working relationship we have had. We have no doubt that achievement made from the beginning of the year will continue to be felt in the ensuing months as we work steadily and tirelessly towards building a Ghana that is truly beyond aid. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to tackle the challenges with boldness, and with the good Lord on our side, we remain optimistic, assured, and rooted in our resolve to maintain economic stability. We will pursue the initiatives and programs of President Nana Akufo-Addo's led government, which are steadily transforming our nation and creating jobs and shared prosperity for all Ghanaians. Our plans and programs, as outlined in the 2019 budget, are deliberately designed, Mr. Speaker, to build a stronger and better connected country where no community will be left out in the push for sustainable progress in the fastest track possible. We have restored the economy. Even more manifestly, we have restored the integrity of the Ghanaian economy, just like we did over a decade ago. In the words of the latest IMF report, Ghana's recovery economy is truly on the mend. We are no longer in the IMF program that the previous government surrendered to in 2015, not even 4 years after Ghana became an oil-rich country. But the future, Mr. Speaker, is positive. We have discovered oil just like we did 12 years ago, except then we discovered oil at the tail end of the MPP's second consecutive term in office. This is only the first step. Mr. Speaker, this is the government for business, big or small. We are transforming agriculture, and we are transforming industry, and we are building the financial base to fuel that rise. In all humility, Mr. Speaker, the kind of transformation we are seeing today has never been done deliberately on this scale since independence. Our policies are leading to the establishment of factories on a scale never experienced and witnessed in the history of our republic. Mr. Speaker, permit me to stress this point. This is a government for the poor. This is also the government for the masses. We may not stand on rooftops and beat the propaganda drums high and loud. We prefer to allow our actions to speak. We are feeding school children, Mr. Speaker. We are giving them free education. We are expanding the LEAP social welfare cash to many more households. We have revived the national health insurance that we introduced. We have increased social benefits to the physical challenge. We do so, Mr. Speaker, not because we claim to be social democrats, no. We do so because we believe in the principle of empowering the greatest number of people for the greater good. We believe that every Ghanaian has the potential to represent a nation just as we are in this chamber and have been blessed to do so, and all should be blessed to do so. Mr. Speaker, as I approach the conclusion, I want to make the case that Ghana is in a much better shape than it was when we took office 31 months ago. Growth is higher, banks are stronger, education is funding at an all-time record high, health funding is also at a record high, the GEP fund is more robust, more police are on our streets today than ever before, they are better equipped. We will deliver on the bauxite, we will deliver on the policy to build a petrochemical industry, we will support more factories to be built, more farms to be tilled, more doctors and nurses to care for us, more teachers to be attracted to the classrooms, more media houses to be free to contribute responsibly towards this all-important accelerated development journey, more partnership with labor and employers, more decent salaries. Our challenges may be many, but our opportunities are even more. The future is exciting. Let us build, even if we disagree on who the foreman may be. We are building now a better future for ourselves and more so for our children. Let us continue to believe in Ghana. Let us, Mr. Speaker, believe in ourselves. Let us have the courage to be proud about what we are capable of achieving. Be positive, think positive, act patriotic. Let's stand firm. Hard work and integrity should be our mantra, Mr. Speaker. We as a speaker, like the proverbial parable of the weeds, should not be caught asleep for the enemy to plant weeds among the wheat. Mr. Speaker, the government of President Akufo-Addo will be awake, vigilant, and uncompromising in its drive to transform our economy to a Ghana beyond aid. We are, Mr. Speaker, inspired by J.B. Dankwa when he says in his account doctrine of God that the Spirit of God is abroad, even in the Gold Coast. We are indeed at this year a chosen people, and Isaiah assures us that those who trust in the Lord will find renewed strength. But, Mr. Speaker, we must endure and enforce these tenets of a Ghana beyond aid. Mr. Speaker, we are resolved to pledge to embrace attitudinal change so that a Ghana beyond aid can be achieved. The 11 fundamental values of patriotism, honesty in dealing with each other, respect for each other, discipline, volunteerism, self-reliance, wise and efficient use of Ghana's resources, transparency and accountability, equal opportunity for all, strong support for the private sector, collaboration among social partners, particularly labor, business, and government for economic development must prevail. Mr. Speaker, a new Ghana does beckon, the Ghana beyond aid, a Ghana that pays only for the energy it uses, a Ghana that receives full value for its cocoa, a Ghana that is a hub for continental free trade, a Ghana whose infrastructure is well standard, and a Ghana whose children are skilled and working. A patriotic, Mr. Ghana, and patriotic, Mr. Speaker, and spiritual Ghana who will put the Republic first. It is then, Mr. Speaker, that we, our country, will soar high on the wings like eagles and run and not grow weary and walk and not be faint, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, consistent with Article 179, Section 8 of the 1992 Constitution and Standing Order 143 of this august House, I beg to move that this House consider and approve an amount of 6,370,355,925.82 Ghana cedis as supplementary estimates to original appropriation of 78,771,833,602.82 Ghana cedis to bring the revised total appropriation to 85,142,189,527.94 Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, I so move. Thank you, and God bless us all.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, debate on the motion shall stand deferred. Under Order 140 sub 5, the part of the statement relating to revenue and expenditure shall stand committed to the Finance Committee accordingly. I'm inclined to adjourn. Honorable Majority Leader, if there's any other indication, you may so say.
Okay, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I've indicated, you have committed the part relating to the supplementary estimate to the Finance Committee. Mr. Speaker, the motion that we had before us really is in two parts. One relates to the mid-year review, and the other relates to the supplementary estimates for 2019 financial year. Mr. Speaker, I believe that going forward, we should develop a system where a mid-year review, which does not attract supplementary estimates, that component of the mid-year review should be provided to Parliament as information, as any statement, and then we'll pass comments on them. The side that relates to supplementary estimates really will be referred to the Finance Committee. They will come with their report, and then we debate that. I think that going forward, we should evolve better arrangements to commenting on mid-year review as a statement, and then supplementary estimates. We'll debate it. Yes, that is how it should be. Unfortunately, I think we've not made a distinction all this while. And that is why I'm saying going forward, we should have a better way of debating or commenting on the mid-year review that comes to us. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I believe that, as you have said, we will defer further comments until tomorrow, and I'm hoping that the Finance Committee would have finished with perusing the document and submitting their report. When they're able to do that, then we can take both the comments on the mid-year review and the supplementary budget together, so that hopefully by the close of the day tomorrow, we'll finish the debate and the on the supplementary estimate as well. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I believe we are in good hands. I can almost predict what my colleague, the minority leader, who has become very jittery in his seat, I can almost predict what he wants to say. But if it's intended for him to say that they are ready, I will tell him that we are more than ready to take them on. We are more than ready to take them on if they so desire. Mr. Speaker, we are in your hands, and we wait for tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, I can only thank you for the opportunity. I don't intend to engage the leader, but the combined effect of Article 1798 and Section 28 of the Public Financial Management Act must be a proper guide. Mr. Speaker, I only note that today the minister was unaccompanied by the vice president with Hello Tax App, Energy WhatsApp Tax App, with Energy Sector Levy App. The spirits of our countrymen and women have been lifted. We look forward to the debate, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. If that lifts the spirits of Ghanaians, particularly tax measures that the man supporting you stood opposed. You see, a deer doesn't laugh at his mother's teeth. When it grows, its own will show. Thank you.
Where there are comments, order. Where there are comments pursuant to briefing, honorable members may comment. Where there is a need for approval, as per both our standing orders and the Constitution, which is the bona fide right of Parliament, honorable members will contribute to that aspect of the debate and decide upon what to do. This honorable House will stand adjourned to tomorrow, 10 o'clock, in the forenoon.